Great. Well, thank you so much for joining us tonight. My name is Matt Nygård. I'm the president of NorCham Chicago. Welcome. Tonight we are featuring the Norwegian-American Genealogical Center, Naeseth Library in Madison, Wisconsin. And we have their executive director, Dana Kelly, with us. And we also have as our honorary consul for Norwegian honorary consul for Wisconsin, Illinois, Susan Meyer. And I will be introducing both of them in a few minutes. Just talking briefly, because we have so many with us tonight, our record, we were just talking amongst ourselves, our record for the largest registration for a webinar for NorCham was 166, which we set last year with the Friends of the Viking Ship. And tonight we have 233 people registered for this webinar. So thank you very much for spending a little time with us this evening. Talk to you a little bit about NorCham Chicago. We were formerly the Norwegian-American Chamber of Commerce, NACC. We have since rebranded to NorCham Chicago. We have 7 chapters across the country, and we promote business and trade between the U.S. and Norway. And we work very closely with the honorary consuls, and I work very closely with Susan Meyer as honorary consul for Illinois. In 2024, we had a very busy year. We had the president of Storting from Norway here, Masoud Gharahkhani. We had the Norwegian ambassador to the U.S., the former ambassador, Anniken Krutnes, and the current ambassador, Anniken Huitfeldt. And so we had 14 events over the course of 2024, many of them in collaboration with other Norwegian organizations, and some in person, some webinars like we have tonight. We will be sending out a recording of this webinar to all of you. Also the links to both NAGC and Susan Meyer's information, so you can reach her, and for NorCham Chicago, let you know about events coming up. I will highlight one event that's coming up on February 8th. The Torska Club has their open luncheon, and the website, the information for that and registration is available on our website. I also hope that you would consider joining NorCham Chicago, even if you're not in Chicago, but we do have resources for our members online. We have, just like this webinar, we have recordings of our webinars going back to 2020. So we have over 20 webinars recorded of all kinds of interest to Norwegian Americans. So hopefully you can check those out. Now I would like to introduce Susan Meyer. Susan is the Norwegian Honorary Consul for Illinois and Wisconsin, and she's also a partner at the NorCham corporate member, UB Grinsfelder. Susan, I'll pass it over to you.
Good evening. I'm so delighted to join you all tonight. Thank you very much for your kind introduction, Matt. It's always great to work with you. You work very hard for NorCham and for the Norwegian-American community, and it's a pleasure to do some projects with you. I want to announce that this is my first official act and event as Norway's Honorary Consul for Wisconsin. I have attended things there as sort of an outreach on behalf of my role in Illinois when there was no honorary consul appointed. I've recently received my official notice that my territory has been expanded and that I am now the honorary consul for Illinois and Wisconsin. So how fitting for me that the event tonight is a program with NACGL, the absolute perfect bridge between our shared heritage and the modern present Norway. So for those of you who are not familiar, I want to briefly introduce what the Honorary Consulate does and is about. Our office is located in Chicago. We're right downtown at the corner of Madison and Wells. There are basically 2 functions. There's the consulate piece, where my role is to support Norwegians that are in the region. So notarizing documents, providing information. In the digital age, as you can imagine, Norway's security has greatly reduced the services that the honorary consuls can provide. So I cannot assist in any processing of visas, passports, obtaining person numbers, not even for babies any longer. All of those things require biometrics, and the machines are located in the embassy in Washington, D.C., and the 2 remaining full diplomatic missions, which are in New York and in San Francisco. There are 31 or so of us honoraries scattered around the country, and we're certainly here to help. We're spend most of our time with the diplomatic part of our designation, which is representing Norway in our respective regions. So here to help facilitate commercial, economic, social, scientific, and educational relations between Norway and the states of Illinois and Wisconsin. So to that end, I want to share one piece that kind of ties the bridge, again, bridges the time. 2025 is the 200th anniversary of the first organized emigration from Norway to America. In 1825, the sloop Restauration left Stavanger for New York with 52 people on board. I think there was a baby born, so I think 53 people arrived. And this year, King Harald will send off a replica on July 4th of 2025, the new ship. The Crown Prince couple, I believe, is scheduled, and they're still sorting out details, to greet the boat when it arrives in the New York harbor, and I think that will be in October. There are several crossings websites that you can find this information. There's an official one, Crossings 200, and the Norwegian-American, I believe, also has a very good link with a lot of information on it. So for your reference, Matt will send this out later, but the website that the consulate maintains, and it will get updated. I apologize, it hasn't been yet because today was the day I ordered the new URL, is currently norwayinillinois.com. However, I have set up two emails for your reference. One is info@norwayinwisconsin, so norwayinwi.com. And also S. Meyer, my last name, so SMEYER @norwayinwi.wisconsin.com. The phone number for the consulate is 312-377-5050, as it has been for about 20-something years now, 25 years. That has not changed. But for any of you who need to reach me on a more urgent basis, I will share my mobile, which is 312-966-5141. So again, it is my pleasure and my privilege to serve as Honorary Consul for Illinois and now Wisconsin. And I pledge, if there are things that I can service or attend, or events or things that you think it would be useful to have a representative of Norway at, or if there are services and support that we can provide, either through our offices or in connection with Matt or any of the other Norwegian organizations in the region, I welcome the invitations and look forward to seeing and meeting you all. Thank you again.
Great. Thank you, Susan. I echo what Susan said. It's been my pleasure working with you, in bringing new business to the Illinois and Chicago region. So thank you for all you do for us. Now I'd like to introduce Dana Kelly, Executive Director at the Norwegian-American Genealogical Center in Naeseth Library in Madison, Wisconsin. They're celebrating their 50th year. I was at the 50th celebration at the Stoughton Country Club on October 19th. It was a fantastic event, full house, with a lot of support. And we're going to hear more from Dana on the history of the museum and the services and resources they offer. Dana got her degree at the University of Wisconsin-Madison in Scandinavian Studies, and has had ties to the library for years. So she'll talk more about her experience with that. But now I'll turn over the presentation to Dana Kelly. And thank you, Dana, so much for joining us tonight.
Well, thank you so much for having me. It's always exciting to be able to discuss my favorite thing with people, which is Norwegian genealogy. I can't believe there's so many other people who are interested in hearing about it as well. So,
right before you get started, I forgot one thing. We do accept questions. You can submit questions in Q&A, and after the presentation, we'll go through as many as we possibly can. So please submit your questions as you listen to the presentation, and I hope you enjoy it. All right, thank you. Thanks, Dana.
Oh, you bet. Yes, thank you for that reminder. That was a good point that we had forgotten to address. But I've been researching my family history for over 30 years. So I do remember what it was like to do this before the internet and before we had email. And that, like Matt said, that passion for family history led me to the Scandinavian Studies Department and eventually to my position here at NAGC in 2019. I've also been involved in our local historical society. I've been on the board for that since 2009. I've been a part of the local genealogical society here in Madison since 2020. So this is pretty much what I live and breathe. But anyway, to the matter at hand, NAGC, We are the most comprehensive library in North America that is dedicated exclusively to Norwegian-American genealogy. There are bigger genealogy libraries in the world, to be sure. The one in Salt Lake City is definitely a lot bigger than we are, but we're the only one that's dedicated to Norwegian-American genealogy specifically. We're the largest one dedicated to that particular ethnic group. A few years ago, it was actually kind of serendipitous timing. During the pandemic, we took the opportunity to add an elevator and do some other renovations to the building to make it fully ADA compliant. So if you haven't been to see us in a while, you won't recognize us. We look pretty different than we did in 2019. So if you are in the Madison area and would like to stop in and take a look at our collection and take a look at our library, please do. We'd love to see you. So yes, we have been around for 50 years. We just celebrated our anniversary this past fall. This is a picture of our founder. This is Gerhard Naeseth. And originally his library was just his own collection in his home. He began collecting materials relevant to Norwegian American history and genealogy back in the 1940s. And it was all just to satisfy his own personal curiosity. He was actually a professor at UW-Madison of library science. And since he was employed at the university, he had the opportunity to influence the collection in their library as well. So there are a lot of good Norwegian genealogy materials at the Memorial Library at UW-Madison too, because of him. In 1974, he was persuaded by the board of Vesterheim Museum in Decorah to found a genealogy center. And he said he would do it on the condition that it be built in Madison because that's where he lives. And they said, yes, that's fine. If you're going to lead this genealogy center, we'll put it in Madison where it is convenient for you. And so the Vesterheim Genealogy Center was officially founded in 1974 as an affiliate to Vesterheim. And it started in Gerhard's home, then it spilled into his office at the university. Then pretty soon it was in a corner of the library at the university. And finally it had outgrown those spaces and the collection was moved to our current location, which is 415 West Main Street in Madison in 1992. And we have been there ever since. It did eventually become clear that Vesterheim's mission didn't really include genealogy. So in 2007, the Vesterheim Genealogy Center became the Norwegian-American Genealogical Center, and we are a completely independent organization now, incorporated in the state of Wisconsin. That happened in 2007. So today we have over 1,200 members. They're throughout the United States, Canada, Norway. I think we even have one in Japan. So we are definitely a worldwide organization. So our collection, I actually need to update this. We just tipped over 12,000 items in our library. And that might sound like a lot of things, but compared to your public library, that's only a fraction of the collection that a lot of larger libraries have. There's some libraries in the US with over 1 million books. But what is special about our collection is that everything is related to Norwegian and Norwegian-American genealogy and history. And the main reason that people come to see us is our collection of bygdebøker, which I will talk about in a little bit more. Nearly half of our collection actually is published family histories, and these have been donated to us by and large by our members who have researched their own families and then donated the finished product to us. And these can be such an amazing source of stories and photographs and copies of documents that you might not have access to otherwise. We also have quite a collection of other Norwegian American resources like church histories, community histories, school histories, things that were areas that were heavily settled by Norwegian immigrants, institutions that were founded by Norwegian immigrants. And some of what we have on the shelves include Gerhard Naeseth's personal collection of books. Every once in a while, I'll pick one up, look inside, and sure enough, he's written his name on the inside cover. A lot of the books that we have can be found at other libraries, but we do have some things that can't be found anywhere else. Gerhard Naeseth was compiling Norwegian immigration data long before there was any such thing as FamilySearch.org or Ancestry.com or any other genealogy services that we're so familiar with today. He was going through passenger lists and the US Census and church records to create lists and indexes for Norwegian-American family researchers. And a lot of those lists have been turned into searchable databases that we have available to our members on our website. One of the most important projects, in my opinion, that he undertook was his cemetery transcription project. He actually spent his summer vacations going through cemeteries throughout the Midwest and transcribing headstones of Norwegian Americans who were buried there. So I always like to say he was findagrave.com for Norwegian American cemeteries decades before there was findagrave.com. And his transcripts today contain headstones that you can't necessarily read anymore. He was doing this back in the 60s and 70s. So some of them have been damaged to the point by weather and other things that they're illegible now. But he wrote down what they said. So we have evidence of some things that would be irreplaceable otherwise. One of the reasons that he was so intent on collecting data on Norwegian immigrants is that he wanted to document and publish a directory of Norwegian immigrants to the United States. So before his death, Gerhard was able to publish some of his work. And then his work was continued by the staff and the volunteers of NAGC after his death. And they published the remaining volumes of this 5-volume series. These books are no longer in print, but they have been converted to PDFs, and they're also available on our website to our members. So you're able to log in and read these books right on our website. One of the proprietary collections that we have that was actually not created by Professor Naeseth is the database that contains the soldiers who served in the Wisconsin 15th during the Civil War. You may have heard of the Scandinavian Regiment that served in the Civil War, and it was primarily made up of Norwegians, a few other Danes and Swedes, but pretty much Norwegians. And they served under Colonel Hans Christian Haag, who also was a Norwegian immigrant. And this database was actually created by Scott Meeker. He is an avid Civil War historian. He created this resource, had his own website, but at some point, I don't know if it just became something that outgrew his ability to maintain it, or he lost interest in it. Either way, he donated the information to NAGC. And so this database we have on our website for free to anyone. You don't have to be a member in order to search this database. So just to show you kind of what you might see on this database, I did a search for Ole Olsen. I figured I couldn't miss if I searched for that name. And I just grabbed the first one. So our database contains a lot of information about these soldiers. We have birth and death information. We have the names of the parents, information about the service, his length of service, what battles he may have fought in. Some of these entries have photographs. Some of them have biographical information about what these soldiers did after they returned home after the war. Sometimes there's information about their marriage, their children, businesses that they may have founded. Some soldiers have a lot more information than others, and this is something that we are continually updating. We have a volunteer, Carolyn Love. I don't know if she's on here tonight, but she has very lovingly cared for this database for years, and she's always adding more information about these soldiers. So please check it out if you're interested in the men who served in the Wisconsin 15th. This database has many, many names in here and a lot of information about these soldiers. So I do want to spend a little time talking about this amazing and uniquely Norwegian tradition that is kind of the heart of our library, and that is the bygdebøker. The history of the farms in Norway is so important that most of the communities in Norway have published what are known as bygdebøker. So a bygd is a rural community in Norway. It's kind of similar to a township here in the United States. And this really is the heart of our collection. This is why people come to see us when they come to our library. These have been written and published by historians, genealogists, historical societies, local governments, and they tell the history of the community. They include the history of the churches, the post offices, schools, businesses, other institutions in their community. Sometimes they include information about the wildlife, the prehistory, but most notably, they include extensive histories of the farms in that community. And these farm histories include, it's not just what type of crops were grown or what types of livestock were raised. Most of the space on the page is dedicated to the people who lived on the farm. So they are just a vast treasure to genealogists. It is absolutely amazing. We have about 2,000 of these at NAGC. We just got 4 large boxes today. So we are continuing to add to this collection. This is something that's really important to us. We want to have the book that you need when you come to see us. And from my calculations, we have, if we don't have the largest big book collection in North America, we're second. I mean, we are really striving to have what you want. So this page is just out of a random big book. I wanted to show you kind of what these are and why they're so exciting to a genealogist. I just grabbed the one from Ordal. And you can see we've got a list of children born to a couple. We get the year that when they were born. In some cases, it tells when they immigrated to the United States. It might tell who these children married. It might tell when they died. There's just so much here that you can use for your genealogical research. But like the veggies in the corner of the slide here, they're definitely not perfect. Much to everyone's frustration, including mine, not every community in Norway has a book. There are some areas where a book has never been written. So I apologize to everyone listening here who has ancestors from Jevnaker, Gran, or Lunir. There is no big book for you, unfortunately. And these are also only done in rural areas. So if your ancestors lived in a city like Bergen or Oslo, if you've got long roots, deep roots in an urban area, your family might not be in a big book. And these books are really written in a very wide variety of styles. So just when you get the hang of one, you'll switch to another series, you'll switch to another book, and it will be completely different. So if you're having trouble, if you're struggling going through these books and trying to understand how they're organized, we're pretty confident with these. We look at these a lot. So if you're struggling, let us know and we'll help you figure out how they're organized and show you how you can trace your family through the numbering system or however the particular book you're looking at is laid out. Now, these books are all written in Norwegian. Very few translations of these exist. We do have a few. There are 2 or 3 that we have in our library that have been translated into English, but the vast majority of them have not. So another thing that's interesting about it is there is a tendency for these Norwegian authors to say, if you're writing about the people from this area, you should use the language of the people from that area. So some of these are written in some pretty obscure dialects, but don't let the fact that they're not in English stop you from trying to use them. They're pretty well organized. They're pretty easy to decipher. So even if you don't read Norwegian very well, you can still use these. I'm very confident that you can still take advantage of what's in these books. Now, they are, like I said, generally written by professional historians and professional genealogists. They're very well researched. They're pretty darn accurate. But we do find mistakes, and we find mistakes in them pretty regularly. Usually the mistakes, if I had to say what the most common thing is that I see, is a mistake of omission. Maybe the author will miss one of the children that belongs to a family. Maybe a couple had 5 kids, but the book only shows 4. Or they will only include the first wife to a man and not his second wife. but occasionally we do find some substantive mistakes, like adding the wrong child to a family. We do find those occasionally. So it is very, very important that when you're using this book, you use it as a shortcut to point you in the right direction, but you should double check what you're finding, because it is entirely possible that some of the information in that book is incorrect. So if using these books sounds great, but you're hoping to get a little more guidance, we do have a class actually that we offer that shows you how these books work, some tips and tricks for using them for genealogy. And we do this class online, so you don't need to come to Madison to do that. Like I said, these books are all different, but some of them contain maps. I love this one right here that shows the locations of all of the farms in that area and the different shape. And I just love how the farms are all long and skinny, so they all have access to the water. I just think some of the things in these Big to Bucket are so helpful when you're doing research. And one of the reasons that the farms are so important for genealogy is because the farm name is often where a lot of families in the United States with Norwegian heritage got their last name. These farm names in Norway are centuries old, and I'm not exaggerating. Some of them go back to the Middle Ages, if not older. Some of them are Viking era. These names have been around that long. The spelling may have changed, but the name has pretty much remained the same, and the farms still have those names. So if the farm that your family left behind still exists, you can go visit it. We are so incredibly fortunate as people with Norwegian heritage. Other ethnic groups simply don't have that option. For a lot of other ethnic groups, just finding the church where your ancestors got married or finding the cemetery where they were buried is probably the closest you can ever get to where they were living. But not when you're Norwegian. We can often find the farm that they left behind, and you can go right back to it and walk right where your ancestors walked and lived and worked every single day. It's so amazing, and I try not to take that for granted, because we are just so lucky. But one thing to keep in mind, there may be dozens of farms that have the same name. So if you happen to come from a farm called Hagen or Haugen or Berg or Dal or Ness or Vik, those names are really, really common for Norwegian farms. So there's quite likely dozens that have the same name. So if you're going to go back and visit, we want to make sure that you're going back to the correct Berg farm, not one that's on the other side of the country. Sometimes these books will show how the farm has been divided over time. That was very common, that a farm would be divided into pieces to give multiple sons access to a farm. And this is an example of a farm called Vik and how it was divided. And you can see how we've got three little clusters of buildings. One is Øvrevik, one's Midtvik, and one's Nedrevik. So usually the root of the farm name would remain the same as they divided it, but they would add something descriptive to it to help us know which part we're looking at. So in Norwegian, Øvre means upper, Midt means middle, and Nedra means lower. So this is probably on a hill, and Nedrevik is closer to the water on lower ground, and Øvrevik is higher up the hill. Some have illustrations like this that show how the size of the farm has changed as it's been divided up. So on the right, we have the years, and then across the bottom and the top, you can see how wide the farm had. The width of those lines indicates how much land the farm had. And so you can see back in 1750, there were 4 divisions, and they were all kind of equal. And as we get closer to 1900, it gets smaller and smaller and smaller. And by 1900, this farm has been divided into 20 tiny little pieces. And I really like this illustration because it helps us understand why there was such an exodus from Norway during the second half of the 1800s. These farms had gotten so small, they weren't large enough to support a family anymore. And you may notice as you're looking at this, the name of the owners, everybody here is using a patronymic name. Well, what that means is the son's last name is different from his father's last name because Norwegians maintained a very different naming tradition that sometimes confuses Americans when they first start digging into their heritage. And this isn't necessarily a resource at NAGC, this whole naming tradition, but it's a really important concept to understand because it explains a little bit about why the farm history is so important for researching your Norwegian roots. So I just want to spend a little bit talking about these names. And this is probably one of the most common questions that we get when people first come to see us. They want to know why their ancestors had such totally different naming traditions than we do. And it's because they just had a different system. So for simplicity, I've got a family here. We got a mom, dad, and a couple of kids. And Norwegian names are very sex specific. You don't have a name like Dana in Norway where you have to wonder, now, is that like Dana Delaney or Dana Carvey? What kind of Dana are we talking? In Norway, if your name is Lars, you're definitely male. They don't have names that slide back and forth. And first names in Norway have always been permanent, just like they are here in the United States, what we're familiar with. Now, the second part of the Norwegian name is that patronymic, and that is also permanent. And a patronymic name is adding son or daughter to the father's first name. So if we go back to our family, if Mikkel's father is named Lars, his name is Mikkel Larsen. And if his wife Sigrid, if her dad's name is Oli or Olaf or Olav, something like that, her name is going to be Sigrid Ol's daughter. And then their children are named Mikkel's daughter and Mikkel's son because their father is Mikkel. Everyone in this family has a different patronymic name. Anna and Lars, the children, have different patronymics because they're different sexes. One's a son and one's a daughter. And the parents and the kids have different patronymic names because their fathers have different names. And so what that means is having the same patronymic name doesn't necessarily mean that people are related. If two men with the same first name have children, their children are going to have the same patronymic name simply because their fathers happen to have the same first name. So I've got two families here where the father is named Mikkel. Their children are Mikkelsen and Mikkel's daughter because their father is named Mikkel. It's purely a coincidence. It doesn't mean they're related. They could be. They may very well be related, but they aren't necessarily related. That common patronymic name doesn't necessarily mean that there's a family relationship. Now, the third part of that name is the farm name. And this is really where people get tripped up. The farm name is more of an address because it changed every time somebody moved. So we go back to our family again. If they're all living on the Vik farm, they're entitled to use the name Vik. The children are not using the name Vik because their father is using it. The wife isn't using the name Vik because her husband is using it. They are all using Vik because they live together. If they move as a family, they'll start using a new farm name. Whatever name of the farm is that they go to, that's the name that they'll start using. Now, if Lars grows up and moves away and the new farm he's on has a different name, he will use a different name. The rest of his family will still be Vik, but he'll be something else because he moved away. If they have a housekeeper move in with them, their housekeeper will start using the same name as the rest of the household. So again, having the same farm name doesn't mean people are related necessarily. These two families may just happen to live on two farms that are called Vik, or maybe they actually live on the same farm, but they live in two separate houses. That was really common too. They don't necessarily share any type of kinship bond just because they have that same farm name. And this concept is really important for Norwegian genealogy because it's where so many of us got our last name. Our president of NorCham, I can guarantee you that his last name is a farm name. It screams farm name when I saw it. So that's where his family got their name. After arriving in the United States, a lot of Norwegian immigrants decided to keep that farm name as a family name that was passed from father to child the way that we're used to it now. And so if these naming traditions sound a little tricky, we do have a class where we talk about this in a little bit more depth, because there is some other tricks and nuances to how this naming system works too. And again, that class is also offered online. We do all of our genealogy classes online. But back to the resources. I alluded that it's important to double check the information that you find in a Big Book, because it might be incomplete or just flat out incorrect. And the place to do that, generally speaking, are the Norwegian Lutheran Church records. The Norwegian Lutheran Church was actually the official vital statistics department for Norway until 2012. So all baptisms, marriages, confirmations, deaths, all of these things were recorded by the pastor at the congregational level. They didn't just keep those church rights in their church books too. They recorded other things like who was moving into the congregation, who was moving out of their parish. These records are an absolute treasure, and we do have them on microfilm at NAGC. So this happens to be a baptism. I just grabbed one. This is from 1855, but you can see all of the information that's recorded here. We have the birth date of the child's name, the name of the parents, which farm the parents were living on when the child was baptized. It indicates whether or not the parents were married. And sidebar, children born out of wedlock in Norway were baptized, and the father is almost always named. So if you have an out of wedlock birth in your family, that isn't necessarily a dead end like it is with a lot of traditions. In Norway, the father was almost always named in these records. So you can still continue to research your ancestors, even if the parents weren't married. And we are just so lucky. I've said this already at least once, but I'm going to say it again. Norwegian record keeping is outstanding, and there's been very little record loss. Norway has lived in relative peace for the past several hundred years, even during World War II, when Norway was occupied by the Nazis. The Nazis didn't go around burning churches and destroying records. Norway didn't suffer the record loss that like London did during World War II. So odds are your Norwegian family can be traced through church records well into the early 1700s, if not into the 1600s. And when someone says to me that they have traced their Norwegian family back to the 1600s, I believe them, because it is entirely possible to go that far with original source records. But I'm also happy to report that you don't necessarily have to use microfilm to access these records. You don't even have to leave your living room. The records that have been released to the public that have reached the minimum age threshold are available for free from the Norwegian Digital Archives website. This is an unbelievable website. We are, again, so unbelievably fortunate that the Norwegian government has made these accessible to us, and they don't charge us to use these records and to view these records. I could spend days talking about what's on this website. This is the holy grail for Norwegian research. They have scanned images of baptism, confirmation, marriage, and burial records. They have every Norwegian census that's available through 1920. That's the most recent one we can see. They have immigration lists. They have military records. They have court records. The most useful court records probably for genealogy are the probate records. It's a fantastic website, but it's not always easy to use. Most of these records have not been indexed. So what that means is that sometimes in order to use this website effectively, you have to have an idea of where and when an event took place. And then you have to be willing to virtually, grab the book off the shelf and page through it to look for the record. Like the saying goes, things can be fast, they can be good, and they can be free. Pick two. Well, the digital archives are definitely good and they're definitely free, but they are not fast. It can take a lot of patience to use this website, that's for sure. If there is a search function for the indexed records on the website, but it can be temperamental and it doesn't always work consistently. So if you're trying it and you're struggling, rest assured it's not you. It is the website, and that happens to all of us. We do have a class dedicated to using this website because it is not the easiest website to use. They have been making a lot of upgrades to it over the past 2 or 3 months, and they've made a lot of changes to it and a lot of improvements to it. So things are kind of in flux right now, and I am hoping that these changes are bringing us more effective searching and more indexing. Um, so because they are doing doing a lot of construction and work on it right now, don't be alarmed if you start using it and then the next day everything changes. They are doing some work on it right now. So because Norwegian genealogy has some unique aspects to it, the staff at NAGC has created some resources for you. This is the 7th edition of our research guide. You can get that directly from us, or you can get it from Amazon. It's available there too. Since our last update a few years ago, we have added quite a bit of information. We've added information about the digital archives, updates to other websites that are useful for genealogy. We've added a section on DNA and other innovations. So this might be something that you could check out if you're looking for a genealogy resource. We also have a YouTube channel. You can watch several presentations that were recorded by the world famous Jerry Paulson while he was still with us, and a couple that were done by me. I'm not quite as famous as Jerry, but I do have some things that are worth hearing once in a while. Generally, these are genealogy how-tos. They're all free. So, invite your friends over and watch some videos. We've got quite a few of them out there. Facebook is a great way to keep up with everything we have going on. We always post our events here, new additions to our collection. When we get some new books, we'll take some pictures and put those out on Facebook. If we get new staff or new volunteers, genealogy tips like our word of the week. Every week we put up a word that you find in church records or Big to Book and explain what it means. If you're interested in genealogy, please like us and follow us so you can keep track of us and what we're doing. We do also carry this map series. If you're planning a trip to Norway and you want to actually get to the farms where your ancestors lived, you really can't do it without a map like this. This map series shows the modern roads and highways, and it also shows the names of the farms that still exist in Norway. So it shows you how to drive right up to it. Now, they do cover a very small area because they are extremely detailed. So you may need several, in fact, to find all of the farms that you want to see. The first time I went to Norway, I took about a dozen because the maps just cover such a small area. But we can definitely help you figure out which ones you need. And we'll even find Aliana as our map guru. She will find the farm and put a little, post-it note arrow on there so you know exactly which one you're looking for. I have a tiny sales pitch here. Every year we offer a Christmas card. This was the image that we used in 2024, so just for last Christmas. This one was designed by a Madison area artist. Her name is Jan Norseth. You may have heard of her because she teaches rosemalling classes at Vesterheim. She's a pretty well-known rosemaler, but she's also a landscape painter, and she did this image for us for our Christmas card. And on the inside is a poem written by a Madison area poet. Her name is Donna Carnes. And as long as I'm talking about Jan and Donna, they also just released a book that's a pairing of Jan's paintings and Donna's poetry. And NAGC is a distributor of the book. So you can find this on our website if you'd be interested in seeing their art and how it complements each other. Some of you may remember when Tom Loftus was the ambassador to Norway back in the 1990s. Just this past fall, he released his memoir of his time living in Norway as our ambassador. And you can also get this from the NAGC website as well. We're also distributing his book. Every couple of years, we take a group of researchers, genealogy researchers, out to the Family Search Library in Salt Lake City. And this trip is not just for people who have Norwegian heritage. So if you want to invite your non-Norwegian friend or spouse and try to talk them into joining you on this trip, this is a great opportunity because that library has every ethnic group you can conceive of represented in their collection. Anyone can get something out of it. Typically during our trip, we're there for 5 days and we take advantage of just the vast resources and the expertise of the staff and volunteers in that library. We will reserve a classroom for occasional meetings throughout the week. We have a few presentations and a few dinners as a group while we're out there, but most of the time is really just spent researching independently. But we do have someone from NAGC on hand to help you in the library the entire time if you need it. I've only been out to that library a couple of times, but I can tell you it is absolutely worth it. And it is definitely something that you'll want to do more than once. In fact, it's been a few years since I've been there, so I'm going again in March to do a little bit of research and just see how things have changed since the last time I was there. I mentioned some of our genealogy classes that we offer, but we also offer Norwegian language classes at our library. We've heard the cries for online language classes, and so I'm looking for someone to teach those. As soon as I can find someone who is comfortable teaching language online, we'll launch an online class. We also offer translation services. So if you have diaries or letters that you would like translated from Norwegian to English, we have people on hand who can do that for you. We also will do the research for you, your genealogical research. If you just have said to yourself, you know what, I thought I wanted to do this, but it's not as much fun as I thought it was going to be, and you want someone to do it for you, we can do that. Or if you have just kind of hit a brick wall and you need a little bit of help to get over the top of it, you can sit down with Chris either in person right at her desk or over Zoom, and she can give you some ideas of where you might go next to see if you can solve the mystery you're working on. If you've taken one of those DNA tests like 23andMe or Ancestry or MyHeritage, and you want to understand what it is and is not telling you, I'd be happy to take a look at that with you and see what we can learn from that. And then we do things like this. If you are looking for a speaker for your Big Dialogue meeting or your Sons of Norway Lodge or your Genealogical Society, a family reunion, senior center, public library, whatever it might be, let me know. I'm happy to do it over Zoom just like this, or I will travel. I probably wouldn't travel to Puerto Rico, but if it's reasonably close, I'm happy to do that. Here is a list of some of the classes we have coming up. In February, we have 3 genealogy classes. They're all online. And the dates and the descriptions and the prices and all the registration information is on our website. But yeah, we have one that focuses on the digital archives, like I said, and one that focuses on using those bygdebøker. And then we have language classes going on right now, but we will start another session probably at the end of March. We haven't set the exact date, but be watching our Facebook page and our website. And once we have those dates set, we will be posting that. We also have a couple of webinars coming up. We have one of our translators is also quite a historian. Her name is Wenche Broughton, and she actually lives in the Chicago area. But she'll be doing a couple of webinars for us this spring, one in March and one in May. The March one is about the church, the history of the church in Norway. And then the one in May is covering that wonderful period in Norwegian history from the Constitution to full independence, right in time for 17. Mai. So if you're interested in that part of Norwegian history, she'll be talking about that. So if you need any help from us, you can reach us at our email here, our website, our phone number. And like I said, be sure to keep an eye on our website for upcoming events as we add more information. Check out those databases that we have on our website, and our card catalog is also online and searchable on our website. So if you're curious about what books, what titles we might have in our collection, you can search that online from home before you come to visit us. So, Matt, did anything interesting come up in the Q&A?
That was really interesting. Thank you, Dana.
The naming thing, how cool was that? Thank you for sharing that.
You bet. It's so important to understand. So you just can't get anywhere with your genealogy if you don't understand the names. It's so important.
Dana, I would suggest if you would click the Q&A button on the bottom of your screen there. I can handle a few of them, but some of the questions are pretty detailed, and I don't want to lose any of the the context in the translation.
Oh,
We have one question about family lore stating that my grandfather's home was occupied by the Nazis and my ancestors printed a newspaper for the resistance. How would I research this?
the first thing that I would do, um, the Norwegian National Library, it's kind of the equivalent to our Library of Congress in Norway. They have a lot of scanned newspapers on the website, and they're searchable and they're PDFs, so they're full text searchable. So that would be the first place I would look. You can narrow the search by location, you can search by name. So I would start there. Now, granted, these newspapers are all going to be in Norwegian, so I don't know if you can read Norwegian or not, but Google Translate isn't terrible. It will give you a reasonable approximation of what is being said in that newspaper. And you should be able, the Google Translate should be good enough to let you know whether or not you're looking at the right newspaper and the right information that you think you're looking for. So that would be the first thing I would do, is try those newspapers. Another place to check would be a Big to Book. If it's a rural home, I would check out the Big to Book for that area, because information like this is often included in that. It's part of the farm's history. They will often say that the Nazis occupied this farm from, 1942 to 1943 or something like that, and give you information like that. So those would be the first two places I would look, is the Big to Book if there is one, and I would try those newspapers on the National Library website.
That's great. Where can I find indexes or farm books and or family histories?
Oh, if only there was such a thing. Um, not at the, we were actually just talking about this today in the library, how frustrating the uh the lack of indexing is in these Big to Book. For the most part, the only index that exists for these books is in the back of the book, and it's only going to tell you the farm name and what page to find it on. The book itself probably does not have an index of every person mentioned in the book. It'll just be the name of the farm. So it's really, really frustrating. Um, and there's no way to know for sure that your ancestor even appears in the Big to Book. Some of them are much better than others. They're not all equal, that's for sure. Um, but a great place to look to see if a Big to Book exists for the area that your ancestors came from. One place that I like to look is familysearch.org, their research wiki. You can look up the communa that your family came from, and it will tell you the title of the farm book, because they don't always have the word Big to Book in the title. So the wiki is pretty good for giving a list of what books were published for that area, and other books that are relevant to genealogy too, not just a Big to Book. Sometimes there's other types of history books that are helpful. And another place that I like to look is a website called Slekt An. It's a Norwegian website, but it's the letters SLEKT and then the number 1.com. And right on the homepage is a link for Big to Book. And then it gives you a list of like all the different counties, and you click on whichever county you want, and then it lists all of the different communas. You click on the communa you want, and it will tell you all of the Big to Book that are published for that area. Family histories, boy, I would go to the card catalogs of libraries that are likely to have farm histories, or I'm sorry, family histories. Our library is one of them. NAGC has a lot of family histories. The Family Search Library in Salt Lake City has a lot of family histories, and some of those are online. Some of them they've scanned. They've gotten permission from the author to do that, so they're not violating copyright. I would definitely try the Family Search website, check their card catalog. And another great place to look is the University of North Dakota in Grand Forks. Their library, the Arne Brekke library, the Chester Fritz Library, the Arne Brekke collection has a lot of relevant material for genealogists. The University of Minnesota has the Wilson Library has a pretty good Norwegian genealogy collection. Luther and St. Olaf both do as well, both of those colleges. Those would be the places that I would look. They're the ones most likely to have that kind of stuff. I wish there was just a universal online repository for this kind of information, but at the moment there is not. But those are the places I would start.
What's the total number of farm books published in Norway?
Well, that is a moving target because they're still being published. We last year in 2024 added about a dozen books that were published just last year. So they're constantly being written, they're constantly being updated. So just because a Big Book doesn't exist for the area that your ancestors came from today doesn't mean there won't be one tomorrow. They are still doing that. And there also isn't a universal definition of what a Big Book is. So the way we define it and how NAGC decides to classify this, we consider there to be about 3,000 of them, and we have over 2,000. So we've got about 2/3 of the Big Book universe on our shelves right now. But someday I would like to have 3/3. That's my goal, is to have every single one of them. So we are actively getting everything we can get our hands on. We have a great relationship with a used bookseller in Norway because a lot of these books are out of print. So in order to find them, you have to be scouring estate sales and eBay and things like that. So he knows what we're looking for, and he's finding things on our behalf, which is absolutely wonderful. I'm so thankful for him that he's helping us do that.
Comment here, my great-grandfather's birth information is not correct in the Big Book for Sandsberg. The wrong person is listed as his mother. I have the church record showing the correct name. So that's the
yes,
example that you had
exactly.
just said.
Yeah, they're not perfect. There are mistakes. And so that's why it's so important to look at those church records. I'm so glad you did that, or you would be chasing the wrong family.
I've seen a Vetla in front of a farm name, but can't find any translation for that word.
I think it means small. I think it's an archaic word for small. Do I have a Norwegian dictionary handy here? Not at arm's reach, but I do think that's what that means.
Okay. Do you have the Q&A open? The next one is a little lengthy and I don't want to, it's from Jeannie.
Oh, yes. Okay. My great-grandmother had a sister. Oh, Einarina. Yes, that was very common for girls to sometimes be given the feminine form of a man's name by adding Ina to the end of it. So yeah, you'll see names like, I've never seen Einarina. That's a new one, but that's how you get names like Larsina, Olina, Christina. Those are all ways of feminizing. I've seen Jensina, ways of feminizing a man's name. You may indeed be right that they were trying to pass along the man's name, but added Ina to it because they didn't ever get a son, perhaps. Another thing that was common among Norwegians, if the father died and the mother was pregnant, and then the baby was born after the father died, if it was a girl, they would often name her after her father, but add that Ina to it. So if the father's name was Lars, and then he died and the baby was born after the fact, they would name her Larsina after her father. My husband has an ancestor who was born after her dad died, and her name is Hansina after her dad.
What's the oldest source or how far back in year do your records go?
Let's see, our records in the library, we don't have a ton of original records on site. Well, we have the microfilm of those church records, but you can also get those from the Norwegian Digital Archives website. You don't necessarily have to see us to do that. The church records in Norway, there really is nothing prior to the Protestant Reformation. So you're not going to see the old Catholic records from the 1400s. When the Protestant Reformation came and Lutheranism became the state church, the Catholic records were destroyed. So the church records, there are some surviving records into the 1600s. It just depends. Most parishes do have things back to the early 1700s. Some go a little bit farther than that. It depends on the region. A great place to look for that, to see when the records start, is that Family Search Wiki. If you go into the Family Search Wiki, do a search for the parish, it will tell you when the oldest baptism records and the oldest church records are for that particular region.
The next one is a little longer, Dana, if you want to take a look at that.
Ooh, burial records for great-grandfather's first two wives. Wow, what an unfortunate situation to lose that many wives. Both of them died in the 1860s in Richland County, Wisconsin, but haven't found anything online. If these were Norwegians, one thing that I would do is see what Lutheran church was in the area. Norwegians generally stuck to Lutheranism when they came to the Midwest. And the Lutheran churches in the Midwest, the Norwegian Lutheran churches, were just as good at record keeping as their Norwegian counterparts. Wisconsin didn't require any vital records to be kept at the state level until 1907. So quite likely there is no state death record for these women, but there is probably a church record. The Kashkanang churches by me, they were keeping records in the 1840s. So I would bet that there is a Lutheran church somewhere in that area that has records in the 1860s that you would be able to see. Most of the Lutheran churches had their records microfilmed in the 70s, and those are on Ancestry now. Ancestry got a license to those. So if you have an Ancestry subscription or your public library has Ancestry, you can probably do a search and see what you can find there. But yet it is possible that they were buried on the farm. But by the 1860s, there were quite a few established Lutheran churches in Wisconsin. So I would definitely look for the Lutheran churches in that area, especially a Norwegian one. But if there wasn't a Norwegian one, maybe a German one. A lot of Norwegians, if they were closer to a German church, would attend that one too. So I would check that.
How many part-time or full-time employees are at the center, and are appointments needed for research assistants?
We have 4 full-time employees and we have multiple part-time, but the part-timers are generally our translators. So we've got 3 or 4 translators who work extremely part-time. They all kind of have a different specialty. So depending on what it is that needs to be translated, we'll send it their direction. We definitely recommend an appointment because some days Chris isn't there. So she, if she's sick or needs a day off, she may not be there to help people. And the other big thing is we're in downtown Madison where parking is a premium. And when we have our language classes, there might not be any parking spaces in our parking lot. So if you show up during a class, the parking lot might be full and you might not be able to find a place to park. So we definitely do recommend an appointment so we can steer you toward a time when you're likely to find a parking place, and there will definitely be someone there who can help you, who has the right experience to give you a hand.
Great. Are there any special plans going to be offering for the bicentennial of the immigration from 1825?
Yeah, the big exciting thing is that we're taking a trip to Norway. We're a group of us are leaving the end of May. We'll be in Norway for almost 2 weeks. The focus is immigration. So we're heading to the major port cities. We're going to the Immigrant Museum in Hamar, seeing some other sites. That's the big thing that we have going on to celebrate the centennial. We're doing more webinars than we have done in the past as well to celebrate it. Um, I think that is pretty much the highlights for
Right.
what we're
Let me
doing.
let me just jump in on that one as well, Matt. So if Tor, if you go online and do a Google search for 200 crossings, Norway and North America, there are multiple websites and there's a master calendar. And you can subscribe and get email updates, etc. But there are calendars they're trying to consolidate all the activities across America. So you'll find things in different locations, you'll see different organizations are going to be having an event, etc. So while the honorary consuls are not empowered or we can't prompt everything, we can attend and support. So if there's an event that from a grassroots standpoint, people want to do, and you're looking for a speaker or you're looking for a representative from the embassy or the consulate or New York or San Francisco or something, or maybe even Norway, just let me know and we'll see if we can try to help you. But I'd commend you to the websites where the master calendars are to see what's going on in your area.
Great. Does your facility have a copy of the recent Norwegian documentary Quisling, The Final Years?
To my knowledge, we do not. We don't have a lot of videos in the collection. It's pretty much books and magazines and print material. But that sounds very interesting because some members of the Quisling family lived in Madison. So I would be curious to take a look at that video for sure, to see that film.
If you look at your website, will I be able to determine whether you have a Bing to book for the farm I'm interested in researching?
Sort of. The Big to Book, the title is usually based on the communa that it represents. So if you do a search on our website for the communa, if you know where the farm was, then you'll be able to see if we have it. Uh, our wet our card catalog is not searchable by farm name in the Big to Book, unfortunately. Um, and some of these Big to Book series, some of them are only one book, and some of them are 10 books in one series for the entire area. And in some cases, they're still writing them. So maybe it's a 6-book series, but they're only on book 5. So it's possible that the farm you want is in the book that hasn't been written yet or the one they're working on. We definitely have that situation with one series where we're just waiting on volume 11. And when it comes, it'll finally be complete. So you will be able to do the search in our card catalog by the geography. So if you know the commune name, do a search, but farm name, not necessarily.
Okay.
So knowing where the farm is kind of important.
A couple of questions about making an appointment coming from out of state. So we've answered that. How much is membership?
Oh, our membership. Membership is $50 a year. And with that, you get access to everything that's on the website. Some of the things are free, like the card catalog is free, the Wisconsin 15th is free, but the rest of the databases are included with your membership, and use of the library is free when you are a member.
My maiden name is Hole, Hoel. I found the Hole Guard when we were in Norway last summer, but how can I find the Hole ancestors in the Midwest?
Ooh, probably the best way, if you take a look at one place to look would be the like the US Census. I don't know what name they were using necessarily here in the United States. I'm guessing it's Whole, that since you say it's your maiden name. So I'm guessing that's the name they used here. You can do a search on the US Census. That is free on familysearch.org. You can search to see where they were living when the census was taken. Um, Other typical sources that people use for American research, besides the census, is church records, like when I was talking about the gentleman who was looking for cemeteries in Richland Center or Richland County, Wisconsin. Church records are a great source. Another thing that is kind of a unique American tradition, I don't know when they immigrated, so you don't mention that here, but if they were here by, say, 1900, something that was really common in the United States was for counties to publish biographical sketches of the prominent men who lived in the county. And in a lot of cases, they would tell where they came from in Norway, when they immigrated, and then they'll go on to talk about their lives here, what businesses they started, did they go to college, who did they marry, who are all of their children, who did they vote for in the last presidential election, things like that. Another great source for finding your family here in the US is newspapers. If there are some subscription sites for newspapers like newspapers.com. Access Newspaper Archive is another one, but there is a free one on the Library of Congress website. It's called Chronicling America, and it has newspapers from all over the country, and they're not just English language newspapers either. So they have Decora Poston on there. They have, if it's published in the United States, it might be on that website. So it doesn't necessarily have to be in English. And they're all full text searchable. Those newspapers on the Chronicling America site are. So you can do a search by location and name. You can narrow it down by year. And newspapers have so many great things in them. You can read obituaries. If your ancestors were politically active or engaged in like the home talent baseball team, you might find some really interesting stories about them in newspapers. I absolutely love that as a way for getting more than just names and dates. Newspapers can really give you some interesting information.
Do you have information on Norwegians in Iowa?
Oh, we sure do. We have a section of our library that is books about communities that were founded by Norwegian immigrants or heavily settled by Norwegian immigrants. Um, so if you're looking for, uh, you know, just depending on what area of Iowa you're looking for, definitely we have books. Probably not every one that ever existed, but we definitely have books that include Iowa Norwegians. It's not just Wisconsin. We want them all.
Um, this one, my great-grandfather fought in the Napoleonic War. Where can I search military records?
The Norwegian Digital Archives has military records on there. They're not all of them are indexed. So you can try searching by name and see what you find. The military records in Norway are very disappointing compared to American military records. When you request military records for soldiers, American soldiers, I mean, you might get a stack of paper an inch thick. For Norwegian records, you might get a name on a list. There's much less information in Norwegian military records than there are in American military records. So I just want you to adjust your expectations that it's not going to be like an American military file. And one of the other things that's hard about Norwegian records is there's a really good chance that you will find a record about a man who has the same name as your ancestor, but it's almost impossible to know whether or not it's actually your ancestor. The identifying information about these soldiers is very limited. It often doesn't tell the names of the parents or where he came from. So it's very difficult to confirm that you're looking at the right person. He's got the right name, but is it him? Sometimes it's impossible to tell. But the Norwegian Digital Archives website does have a section for military records. So that would be where I would look. But I just want you to be prepared that it's not an easy search and it's not nearly as rewarding as American records.
We have a comment here that they watched a very good movie called Number 24 about the Nazis coming into Norway. So they recommended that if you haven't seen
This is
that.
the third person this week to tell me about this movie, so I better go watch it.
Okay. Is there a way to find Family Farm Mark's Burmica?
Oh, um, there it sometimes in the Big to Book, you'll be able to see the like the mark of these men. Not every book has them, but I have seen them in many where they will show that, this is the mark he used when signing contracts or, for the wax seal kind of a thing. So the Big to Book is definitely the best place to find that.
Okay. Um, Another comment, researching North Dakotan families, should mention that the North Dakota State University in Fargo has an amazing collection of county histories. And next to the state capitol is also a research center, has a credible number of books, immigration records, court records. So someone made that comment as well.
Yeah, wonderful.
What about the tradition of naming a next child with the same name as a child who had previously died?
Very common, yes. You might see a family with three children with the same name because they kept losing one. But that was very common. If a child died, the next child of the same sex born after that child's death would very frequently be named after the older sibling. And that tradition was still being carried on into the 1940s in Norway. It was relatively common to see that.
Hmm. The next one you'll probably be helped to answer. Fellows whose great granddad went by Gunderson and then switched his name on the headstone.
Okay. Yep, using Gunderson in the Civil War records, but then started using some form of Bergen on after the fact, and it was eventually Bergen on the headstone. I would guess that Bergen is a farm name, so it's probably not like the city of Bergen or a region known as Bergen. It's probably the name of a farm, because Berg is a pretty common farm name and Bergen is kind of like the Berg. So I wouldn't be surprised if that's a farm. Generally speaking, if your Norwegian ancestor is not using a name that ends with son, it's probably a farm name, almost always. So my guess is that yes, he was Gunder's son, and he was probably spent at least some part of his life on a farm called Bergen back in Norway.
My great uncle's listed in Norwegian census as a seaman, Great Lakes. Do we have any seaman records?
Uh, Here in, that's a great question. Generally, no, the Norwegian Digital Archives does have records of men who worked on ships in Norway, but I am not aware of any record sets for other than military. But if he's in the Great Lakes, there's a really good chance he was working for a commercial shipping line and not in the military. Um, and those are not government records. Those are, employment records. So it would have to be employment records. One place that off the top of my head, I'm not aware of a great source for this, but a website I would check is norwayheritage.com. That's one that I would check for that. They have a lot of passenger lists and crew lists. And if it was a passenger ship in the Great Lakes, the crew might be on one of those lists. So that's the only thing I can think of off the top of my head that might have that information.
Would the Lutheran Church have put a death record in their records for a suicide?
More than likely, yes. It's suicide's not the same taboo in the Lutheran Church as it is in other denominations. So the cause of death isn't always there, but the date of the death, and well, generally they recorded the burial more so than the death. So there was nothing that kept people who complete suicide out of a Lutheran cemetery in a lot of cases. So I would expect to find that information in a Lutheran church.
Are the Mormon records better for searching info prior to 1500?
Probably not. They a lot of their records come from the digital archives in Norway, so they actually have less about Norway than the digital archives has. They have some of the digital archives records, but they don't have everything that Norway has. What I like about the Family Search website is it's easier to search. So oftentimes I will start there, but if I don't find what I'm looking for, then I'll go over to the digital archives because they really do have more than when it comes to Norwegian records. The digital archives has more than Family Search.
I think the next two are comments that you may be able to Gerhard Naeseth's immigration.
Oh, yeah, I'm not sure who Carol is replying here to, but yes, the Gerhard's books cover the immigrants from Norway to the United States up to 1850. So if you're looking for someone who came prior to 1850, but that's a great place to look. And those books are on our website as PDFs, and they're also on Family Search in their card catalog as PDFs as well. So you can see them there.
Then a comment that Christina is wonderful to work with, traveled to the library twice, spent 2 days at the library each time, hoping to travel to the library again this year.
Oh, I will let Chris know you said that. She really enjoys working with the visitors and solving your mysteries. So I'll let her know that you had a great time.
Great. We have a great-great-grandfather who was Swedish, was a sailor on a Norwegian ship. Where can I find records about Norwegian ships and sailors?
You can take a look in the digital archives. They have military lists and they have commercial shipping line lists as well. So I would take a look there. And they have them separated, so you know it's not just one whole pile of records. You can search them separately.
Was Toen a farm name in more than one location? Thoen.
I would guess it is. It's not as common luckily, it's not as common as Dahl or Berg, but there are very few farm names that are only in one place. And I would also guess, with just looking at the spelling, that in Norwegian, it might not be OE, it might be an O with a line through it. It might be THN, or even maybe just TN without the H. So I would be flexible with the spelling on that, but my gut tells me that there might not be an H in it, and it might be an instead of an OE.
And Carol replied that she has 3 of the Gerhard books, and it was in reference to the person looking for a Hoel in. Yes.
Awesome. Something else about those books, just like Big to Book, sometimes when we're going through our own research, we find mistakes. And so there are some errors and omissions that we know about in those books. But we, on our website, have a list of corrections with the PDFs. So take a look in both places if you're on our website, because we have made some updates to those PDFs.
Great. Well, we've reached the end of our questions. I think we set a record for number of questions too. And
wow.
And thank you, Dana, for your time and sharing your information. I'm sure everyone really enjoyed getting expert help on their search, and hopefully they'll find their way to your library and all the resources that you shared with us tonight. And thank you so much for telling the story. And we will share this video link with everyone who registered and with the website information so they can reach out to you. And Susan, again, thank you so much for being with us tonight. And first official act is Honorary Consul to Wisconsin. Very honored to host that. So thank you again.
Thanks for a great presentation, Dana. This was very interesting.
Oh, thank you. I'm honored to be your first official act as our Honorary Consul. So thank you very much.
Well, thank you very much, everyone. We will send out information shortly, and have a great evening.
Thank you.